Hey, do you mind if I come into your business?
Oh, I'd love for you to. We could actually
Oh,
really use some help.
really? What a coincidence! What do you sell? What a coincidence!
We sell shoes, but they don't have toes, toeless shoes,
Mm.
but not sandals. We often get confused for.
Okay, yeah. I think what you should do is market your shoes toward people who have lost their toes, and then act like you're raising money for disability awareness, and then you can use it as a tax write-off.
Uh, 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 why not? Hi there, not qualified. This is not qualified. Zach Faircruisen, best friend of the show, and I would love to hear you guys talk about Nathan Fielder's works, Nathan for You, and The Rehearsal. Thank you so much. I love you. The interactions that he has. So I was watching some season 1 episodes today in preparation. I did this crazy thing today in that I wanted to prepare a little bit for this podcast by watching the source material.
Right.
Weird, kind of a novel idea.
Well, you're a method actor, I guess, or something, because
yeah.
yeah.
The interactions in season 1 are some of the best interactions altogether.
I really hate that he stopped asking people to hang out after like season 2. But those first 2 seasons, he asks everyone if they want to hang out, and it's just the best part of every episode.
So brilliant, dude. He was pretty aggro toward the first episodes because it was more like sketch comedy. But then it became something much deeper. By the way, we should talk about what we're talking about. Maybe
well, tell us who you are first. Well, you did. You said
my
you're a
name's
friend
Zach
of the show.
Faircruisen. Yeah, I'm a friend of the show. I like to say a best friend of the show. I've made my bracelet. I don't know if you've made the bracelet. Joe's made the bracelet, but I wear mine. So
what?
Best friend of the show, Zach Faircruisen.
Nice. And what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about the glory and the wonder of Nathan Fielder and his works, Nathan for You and The Rehearsal.
Yes. So The Rehearsal just came out this summer, and it was brilliant. And because that came out, so my experience with Nathan Fielder is all contained in the past 3 months. So I didn't have to rewatch anything, because you had told me to watch Nathan for You years ago. And then I watched an episode and I was like, that's funny. And then I never watched it again, but I would see clips every now and then. And then when The Rehearsal came out this summer, I was like, this seems really interesting and kind of hilarious. And so I went back and I watched all 4 seasons of Nathan for You. And then I watched The Rehearsal. So I'm fresh,
that is so great. Can I ask you what episode you first watched that you went like cold turkey after?
With Nathan for You?
Mm-hmm.
It was Dumb Starbucks. That was the one you showed me.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Like we watched it together.
You showed me.
Was it something about the experience between you and I that made you not enjoy it?
No, I enjoyed it. I told you I thought it was funny. I just didn't. I don't know. I didn't probably have. I mean, it's on HBO Max, but that didn't exist back then, so I don't even know how I would have watched it.
Yeah, that's true. I think I used to honestly. I watched it from 1, 2, 3 movies. Pretty sure that's how I first watched it.
Sponsor.
Sponsor 1, 2, 3 movies.
Give me the premise of what who's this guy and what are these shows, because they're fun.
Oh, very fun. Okay, so the premise of the show for Nathan for You is that Nathan went to one of Canada's top business schools and made really good grades.
Really good grades, yeah.
Really good grades. And so he wants to share his business knowledge with the world and make the world a better place, mostly just Southern California, make a better place. So he goes and helps small businesses that are struggling, and he gives them business ideas that are more maybe Wall Street kind of oriented to help them take their business to the next level. And some of these antics are as brilliant as sneaking chili into into stadiums that's not allowed, or discount Santa Claus pictures in the summer,
Mm-hmm.
and developing. Uh, how would you describe the movement episode? I think the movement is a really good
Oh
encapsulation.
my, yeah, that is that his that show so many times crossed the line between just like funny television and like performance art or like pranks, like large scale pranks. Like there was something I was thinking of that I kept comparing it to when I was watching it, like something that happened. What was it? Gosh dang. There was something that happened on a late night show a few years ago that everybody was like, what the heck? And then it turned out to be staged for publicity for a movie. Was it for the
Uh,
Joker? Somebody freaked, maybe it was Joker, and like Joaquin Phoenix freaked out on like Jimmy Kimmel or something.
like
I
shot
think
Jimmy Kimmel in the
well,
head.
no. but he did so, I think that if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was for the Joker, and I think he like they got in a fight or something, and it was like really awkward, and they didn't say it was a joke, and then he like walked off or something, and then like a day later they were like they showed the behind the scenes footage, and it was all planned because it was for the, but people were like, wow, he's crazy. That's
Right.
what I felt like, where I was like, and I remember with some of the stuff on Nathan For You, it would be stuff that became a big event and made the news, and people didn't know till later that it was part of the show. Like Dumb Starbucks is a great example of that. But
Right.
but yeah, I think you summed up the show pretty well. It's the
I love it so much, and it's great what you said. It really crosses the line between, for me, like sketch comedy, and then like full scale, like sort of reality character shows.
mm-hmm.
The likes of which I don't know, like the way that he can turn these people who are just wanting to be on camera or whatever, kind of flip the script, put them exactly, at the center stage, and allow their weird eccentricities to come out, and
Yeah,
they become a story in and of themselves, and that they're trying to be famous, or
people
they're
are just
trying to,
so
they'll do whatever they can to make a buck or
yeah.
whatever, and it just becomes the center, and it's making the joke on them. But what makes it a little bit more bearable, and not just so like vindictive, is that Nathan also is playing a really good character in and of himself, but a really
Mm-hmm.
authentic character somehow. And I think that he's one of the
Yeah,
best actors alive today.
it's bizarre. It's also
Yeah.
weird that he like he banked his whole career on playing this character, and I've
Yes.
never seen what he's actually like. Nobody, like there, you can
He doesn't
look up
peel
on
back the
YouTube.
curtain. Yeah.
No, like you can look up times Nathan Fielder has broken character, and it's like a 4-minute video on YouTube, and that's like including all his public appearances and late night
Yep.
shows and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, the premise of Nathan For You is easier, a whole lot easier to give an elevator pitch than the rehearsal. That Nathan For You has a pretty easy elevator pitch, which is that he goes and poses as a business graduate, and gives businesses intentionally terrible ideas just to film the result, and they go along with it because they know they're on TV and it's funny. And he never breaks character, and he plays like a version of himself. And so, but the rehearsal, which I guess we'll wait to talk about in a couple minutes, but it is a lot harder to describe. What is your favorite episode of Nathan For You?
It's a great question. So I rewatched the first episode that I ever saw today, which was The Hunk, which I think is season 1, episode 5. Really solid. I think one of the better episodes of television ever made. And I think I've changed my opinion so much on which one's my favorite. And I think what it has in common is it's typically the last episode I saw. Because honestly, like there's
Yeah.
there's small things in each one of them that make them so great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the camera intros in that episode in The Hunk are really wonderful. The first, so on Nathan For You, they generally have 2 conceits that are happening each episode. On most of the episodes, 2 or maybe 3. And so the first part of season 1, episode 5 is a scare house. He's trying to help a scare house in LA. And he says, what if this place was so scary that people sued you, and you made a lot of press because you got sued for being the scariest whorehouse. And it's really good. So he involves staging this whole medical emergency, and people are in hazmat suits, and there's some kind of infectious disease.
Where they have to get ambulance taken away from the haunted house to the hospital, and then they get out of the ambulance and they realize that's still part of the haunted house.
There's an exit sign that says, like, you finished the ride.
Yeah.
So really good. The beginning of that episode, they're interviewing this like random person on the street who seems really nice, and she's talking about something she likes, and Nathan just runs up behind her and goes, "Boo!" And then the camera immediately just follows him and is like, "Don't you love getting scared?" And it's just, I don't know. It's so genius. Everything they do is like, it's just a little project, and like, it's really imaginative. And that he and the other, the co-producer and co-writer are just, they're saying, what if we got to do this? And what I love about Nathan Fielder's career is that he's been given so much like leash and rope by the channels that have put him on, and a lot of money, which sometimes he makes a joke out of too, about how much money he's wasting in the production of his shows. And but they understand like the artistic expression that he's going after. And I think they've, like, Comedy Central loved it. And they, he canceled his show after 4 seasons because he felt like the project was complete. And I just love that sort of autonomy that he's been able to have as a creator.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see.
For a guy that's only done like 2 things.
Yes.
He did. Nathan For You had its precursor in Canada, but nobody lives in Canada. And then he's produced a couple things, but then, that's it. And so, but I think my favorite, so Nathan For You is definitely in the rehearsal, but it's definitely my favorite reality show ever, and probably one of my favorite shows ever now. But it's not really a reality show. I mean, it is. It's literally a reality show, but it's almost
kind of a meta reality show.
Yes, it's a meta. And so how much of, I was thinking about this. He's credited as a writer, of course. And, he's talked about in interviews or like Reddit AMAs, how their process for Nathan For You, which was prepare for every situation and then just film what happens. How much of that, do you think what you see on the show is mostly genuine? How much do you think happens behind the scenes to stage things or to prod things in a direction? Or do you think it just kind of happens? Because some of that stuff is just too good to be true.
It's too good. Yeah. So it seems too good to be true because of the way it's set up. And the way I think it works is they put people in really awkward situations. That's a whole part of the show. And Nathan puts himself in awkward situations because he's an awkward person, and that's his character. So the more awkward he is, the better he's actually acting, which is really funny how it works out. So they put people in awkward situations, and then depending on the result that they get, they rewrite the episode or the show into whatever reaction they got. And so I think that there's a lot of that going on. I think I read somewhere some time ago that, to get a 22-minute episode, they would have 90 hours of film, but they'd create a story out of one of the, like smaller interactions they might've had and turn that into, the whole project for that episode, which it's done with a lot of editing and, no kind of behind the scenes looks during Nathan For You. But when it moves into the rehearsal, all of the behind the scenes actions actually become a part of the show in a multi-layered way. That's
a very multi-layered way.
Kind of hard to follow at times.
Well, when I was watching the rehearsal, I was thinking how miserable it must have been to edit and to keep track of what takes or what and where you are in the story. And the fact that he was able to have all that in his head and like come up with this is honestly hilarious. But it's also hilarious that, I guess, to talk a little bit about the rehearsal. What is the rehearsal?
a little scatterbrained here.
Yeah.
So, the rehearsal is Nathan's latest project, which you said was picked up by HBO. HBO also bought Nathan For You, so all those episodes and everything bought from Comedy Central. So all those are on HBO now. The rehearsal is I'd say a brainchild of Nathan Fielder following the everything that he did in Nathan For You, but really it's a direct evolution of some of the exact same things that he was doing in that show. Yeah. But instead of the gimmick that he's a successful businessman who's helping out businesses, it's just personal. And it's saying, hey, I'd like to, like make your life better. What if I gave you a chance to rehearse everything before you actually did it? And I created a scene where you'd get as many tries as you wanted to perfect this interaction, and you plan for every possible line that it can go, and you prepare for your life that way because his character says that that's how his approach to life works. And the first episode explains it really wonderfully in that the whole like first 10 minutes of the show are the output of what you see shortly after what he'd been rehearsing um, that interaction with this stranger for weeks and weeks and weeks prior,
In a
even developing a
one-to-one
scaled
replica.
model of his house.
Yes, exactly.
It's so that's conceive the show, and I think a large part of it is just Nathan spending a lot of money to make ridiculous things happen.
Yes.
And sometimes the joke is that there isn't a payoff for
Yes.
all of his investment. And
Yeah.
and there's not a laugh, but the fact that there's not a laugh is the laugh.
Yes, it gets really meta. Well, and what's funniest I think about the rehearsal is spoiler. If you're gonna just go watch it if you haven't seen it, because I actually don't want to spoil it. But it starts off, and the first episode is a rehearsal where he stages this elaborate rehearsal for this guy who's wanting to confess to his friend that he doesn't actually have a PhD or a master's degree, and on it, it's this his friends and him are on a trivia team at this bar. And so Nathan builds a entire replica of the bar with HBO's money, and then hires dozens of actors to populate it and pretend that it's the night he's going to confess it, and they run it over and over again. And so the show sets up that way in the first episode, and you think every episode is just going to be another rehearsal. Like Nathan for You was, every episode was a new business.
Right.
But then the rehearsal only has like 2 rehearsals in it,
Right.
because it quickly devolves into more and more meta as it goes. Because episode 2, he sets up a woman who doesn't know if she wants kids, and so they're going to he gets this house out in the country, and they're going to hire actors to play her children at every age, and then they're going to have her in this house for a couple months while she raises a child from 0 to 18, and then they have the Raising Cane's episode, and then that's it. There's like no more rehearsals after that. It just delves deeper and deeper into itself.
Into Nathan
yes,
as a focal point, but really it's got a really great way.
It's not actually him. It's a made up Nathan, but it is
right.
him.
And in a lot of ways, it's kind of turning the camera around, and like the joke is kind of on the viewer in a lot of ways, because you have expectations of a show from the way that you like generally intake media. And so some of the joke is just that there's no delivery on the premise. It's like jazz music,
Exactly. Well, and I was floored by the fact when you get to the end of the rehearsal that you realize that he embarked on this entire project with millions of dollars in HBO money without knowing where it was going to go, because the entire show ends up being about this kid who thinks Nathan's his dad, and that's like the emotional climax of the whole thing. That's the finale, is him and then Nathan struggling with who he is because of all this. But until that actually happened on set, there was no way that he knew that's where they were going to go until this, you know what I'm saying? Until that happened with the kid. Unless right. Of course that was fake. But
I mean, I'd like to say that he's just really good at winging it, but he's not winging it at all, in that, he's actually trying everything, and he's just throwing a lot of things at the wall until something sticks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But then redoing that thing over and over and over again in a really methodical way that's just seems so tedious and ridiculous and wonderful.
And it is. Yeah.
It is. Speaking of sort of emotional climaxes, so Nathan For You season 4, the last season, ended with a like a 90-minute episode. I think it was like 90 minutes that became something of like a documentary called Finding Francis. And Finding Francis, the line between Finding Francis and the rehearsal is pretty narrow. Finding Francis was a really excellent, though it took some turns, it was a really excellent sort of magnum opus for the whole project of Nathan For You, I feel like, in that similarly to the rehearsal, it just went more layers of meta and sort of turning the cameras around.
Yeah.
And it kind of set the stage, I think, in a lot of ways. So,
yeah.
Really excellent. I don't want to spoil anything about Finding Francis because it's definitely worth a watch. But even some of the small things that went on during Finding Francis, to me, are some of the funniest little bits they have in the show. I'll spoil one thing. They go to a town in Arkansas. He's with this basically a stranger. They go to a town in Arkansas where this guy went to high school, and it's Dumas, Arkansas. And the only thing that Dumas was on the map for is that the movie Mud was filmed there with Matthew McConaughey. All right. And so he says, I never saw Mud, but we needed access to their public library. And so we convinced them that we were there to film Mud 2, Never Clean. So he had like set pieces and like some lines that he created for Mud 2, and I don't
Yeah.
know, that really got me. Speaking
So,
of the rehearsal, by the way, I didn't mention this, but I've never done this before. I watched like the first 20 or 30 minutes of the rehearsal by myself when it first came out, and I was laughing so hard that I had to I had to turn off the TV. And then I had to go get my wife, and I told her, "You have to watch this with me.
yeah.
This is the funniest television I've ever seen."
Yeah.
And
I did,
it really takes the cake for
I
me.
did the same thing. I watched the first episode, and then I went home, and I was like, um, you have to watch this with me, to my wife. And then she did. And I made her, and then she would be like, she almost couldn't take it because it felt so mean, like
Right.
parts of it really felt mean, especially with the, I don't know, because the whole premise of everything he does is to say, look how insane these people are. Aren't people
Mhm.
crazy? But then he, like you said, especially with the rehearsal, he really turns that around and says, yeah, but you are too. And you're watching this, you terrible, sick person.
Right.
So speaking of Finding Francis, though, of anything Nathan has ever done, I think Finding Francis is my favorite thing. It's probably my favorite episode of television ever. One of my favorite things about Nathan For You is the way he uses recurring characters. Like,
Yes.
he just finds people that he thinks are ridiculous or weird, and or interesting, and then he'll invite them back on the show. And it's funny because it's usually people who they almost every episode, people think they're on TV for one thing, and they want to be on TV. And then once the episode airs, they obviously realize that the joke was on them and that's not what they thought it was. But then some certain people will almost not get the joke, and they'll want to be back on the show again just to be on TV, like the security guard.
Yes, dude, he's such a great character. I
Yeah.
was thinking about, because I just saw something that he was in recently, one of those episodes, and there's a character in Parks and Rec that's played by Louis C.K.
Yeah.
And Louis C.K. is trying to be this guy in that role, that character that they made
Yeah.
up. This is the actual guy in real life. This is the person.
Yeah. And
He's trying to be.
it's fascinating to me. These people will come back on the show and almost not really realize. I mean, I don't know what Nathan says to them behind the scenes to get them. I don't know. But one of the recurring characters who's from season 1 or 2 is this Bill Gates impersonator who and that's who is in Finding Francis. And then they reveal in Finding Francis that for the past however many years, he's just been stopping by their offices and hanging out.
I think honestly, Finding Francis is all about this guy really, really annoyed them for a long time.
Yeah.
And so they were trying to get some retribution.
Yeah. You can definitely tell
cost.
because the whole episode has this kind of like sentimental vibe to it, and Nathan's voiceovers are about how they just want to help him find this lost love, but then all his actual interactions with Nathan almost is clearly annoyed by him and just doesn't even want to like talk to him.
So yeah, there's some people that you watch on TV and or you really admire a lot, and I really admire Nathan Fielder, but he's not the kind of guy that would be fun to hang out with.
Mm-mm.
Not at all. I mean, you can imagine just, the way he sort of manipulates and controls people, and, how precise everything has to be, to him. I don't think all that's an act, really. I think he probably is that kind of person.
Oh yeah.
And,
well, it's also funny. Any episode where he has his parents on, which I think only happened twice, once in the rehearsal and once in Nathan For You. And, it almost seemed like they don't understand what he's doing. Like they don't understand, like in in the rehearsal when he has his parents on and he's telling them about this experiment he's doing, living with this woman and raising these fake children and whatever. And they're like concerned for him because she's not Jewish. It's like, I don't know how much he tells them. It's hard to tell with anything that he does, how much people are in on the joke. You really just can't tell.
Right. Yeah. And it almost makes you think, like, how heartless can this guy be to even, like, put the joke on his parents?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the answer is probably pretty dang heartless. I think there's some stuff out there that, like, oh, he's a really good guy and he's trying to, like, bring light to these, silly things, the greed and inequalities or injustices or something. But I think it really is just a joke, and he's just incredibly desensitized and probably heartless.
Yeah, I think he's just. I mean, I think he's one of the funniest people ever in television. But you have
Absolutely.
to. He clearly just thinks it's clearly mean spirited. Everything he's doing is
Yes.
somewhat mean spirited. Even when if you go back and watch when he was on the Canadian show, This Hour Has 22 Minutes. And he would do the same kind of things he does in Nathan For You, just short little sketches. He'd go to local, except he was like a field reporter. He wasn't necessarily going to businesses. He was just going wherever and making them uncomfortable until something happened. And it was the same kind of thing where he would just like, did you see the one where he goes to the sleep clinic?
No.
There's one where he goes to the Canada Sleep Clinic and he's just interviewing this doctor about like what's the best way to get a good night's sleep. And she's telling him the steps and he's like, "Oh, that's interesting. Do you mind if I try that?" And so then in the interview, he just goes through the steps she just told him and then he fake falls asleep for like 20 minutes and just lays there and she's just awkwardly, and then it cuts away and cuts back and she's like on her phone or something and he's still just fake snoring. And then she wakes him up. I don't remember. It's been a while since I saw that clip, but it was good.
Yeah, it's incredible what people do, and incredible what people will say yes to, because they don't want to be impolite or, I don't know, raise an objection. They're kind of just trying to go with the flow. Everybody's trying to avoid conflict, and he just capitalized on that so well. I think it's a form of hypnosis. I think he's kind of hypnotizing these people because they're, in a way, they're suggestible.
Yeah,
because
he's in charge.
He's in charge. Yeah, he's got the cameras. He's got the money.
Yep. He even talks about that in the rehearsal when he's telling Angela, I know I'm in a position of power and I don't want that to influence your decision. But then he still doesn't let her say no.
And they're on camera.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's genius. We should probably mention speaking of, just the way that this show kind of crosses worlds and seems like a giant prank. Several of the Nathan For You pranks ended up, even before the show aired or that season would air, they ended up kind of going public and garnering a lot of attention, the media attention, in really fun ways. So I think there were 3 or 4 that happened.
The biggest
my
one,
favorite.
Yeah. What? Tell us.
So The Movement was a really awesome episode, and even in retrospect now, it's even better because Amazon actually tried to do this essentially. But Nathan goes to a moving business, moving truck, and he says, "Hey, how can I help you?" And they say, "Well, our expenses are high for personnel." And he says, "Well, what if you convince them that it was actually something like a gym membership and they're getting a really good workout and they would pay you to move things for you?" And the guy says, "No, this is stupid," but they do it anyway. And then he needs some branding, an image, and so he hires a man who works out a lot. This older guy who seems really desperate. He hires him to say, "I used to weigh 400 pounds, and then I started, lifting boxes and moving furniture, and I lost all this weight, and now I'm in the best shape of my life." And he ended up going on, a bunch of regional, local television morning shows, and they even ghost wrote a book, and that book was on like the top 10 list on Amazon.
Was it really?
The Movement, yeah.
I want to read it because he hired some college student writing freshman with no experience to ghostwrite this book. And what does he say that he's childhood best friends with? Who was it?
Steve Jobs.
Yeah. Steve Jobs. That's who it was. Yeah. And then he just on these morning shows has to make up all the his charity where he helped with jungle children and all these things. It's just to kind of pretend that it's him.
It's so good.
Yeah, that's probably the best. I really liked. I know a lot of people who don't even know Nathan For You know the Claw of Shame episode or whatever it's called, where he exposes himself to all those kids for the handcuff reveal. A lot of people who don't even know what the show is have seen that episode or that clip. But the one I feel like that I knew about the most was Dumb Starbucks, which is fun. It's funny, the idea is funny, but it's not the best episode. What the funniest thing about, so the Dumb Starbucks episode, the premise is just that I'm keep pausing because we're almost at 11 minutes, and I'm
I'm
waiting.
really looking. I'm watching the clock, like just sweating right now. We did it.
Hey, we
It's
made
like
it past.
Y2K over here. We made it past 11 minutes, and Zencaster didn't crash.
Okay, good. All right, let's keep going.
No more word from our sponsors.
The dumb Starbucks, the idea is just, let's just brand your generic coffee shop as a Starbucks, but put the word dumb in front of everything so that it's technically protected by parody law. And then that doesn't work. They get sued, I think, or a cease and desist from Starbucks or something. But the funniest thing about that episode is not even the dumb Starbucks itself. It's the little, like you said, the little interactions he has with people that are so golden. Because when he's trying to convince the owner of this coffee shop that they need to be parody artists so that they're taken seriously as parody artists. And so they write parody songs and go perform them at open mics. And this is where it's like the meanest it can possibly be toward this poor guy who's just going along with it. And
this is the poor coffee shop owner. He just wants to do a little better.
The parodies that they come up with, or just thinking about them, I laugh like throughout my day. I'll think of one of these and laugh. Like where he gets up on stage and is awkwardly singing, "I'm not afraid to grab my balls." Everybody come and grab my balls. And they're the least funny, least creative things, and they're hilarious. And then the other part of that episode I love is when he hires 2 employees to work at dumb Starbucks, and it's just him and these 2 employees, one's male and one's female, and in their orientation he lingers for a long time on the workplace romance policy or the sexual tension policy or whatever. And so he says, to alleviate sexual tension, we need to know beforehand who you think is most attractive that you work with. And so he asks the guy first, and he's like, well, her, I guess, because it's either Nathan or it's her. And then he asks her who she thinks is more attractive, and she just doesn't want to answer. And he just keeps asking, and she knows she's on camera until she finally says, okay, I guess you. And then for like 30 seconds, he just rubs that in the other guy's face. It's like, so just so we're clear on that, she finds me more attractive. That was probably the best part of the episode to me.
It was so good. It's so good. Yeah, dumb Starbucks was huge. There was in season 1, there was a viral video that they did they made a viral video in order to get some attention for a petting zoo, and that one blew up before the show actually premiered, which is kind of cool. And then it was kind of revealed later that it was a stunt, or it was revealed on the show that it was a stunt. And of course, he did the jokes on Jimmy Kimmel. Was it Jimmy Kimmel or it was Jimmy Kimmel, not Fallon. I don't know, one of the Jimmys. And he I won't spoil that one too much, but he made an appearance on Jimmy Kimmel, but it turns out that the whole experience was actually a part of the show, one of the episodes in season 3 or 4.
And that's the kind of stuff that I love so much about it. It's genius. It's meta, weird, like, there was something else I was going to mention about Nathan for you that I can't remember. Oh, that reminded me of one of the most fascinating parts of the show is how sometimes he seems to just outright break the law, and you in a way that makes you wonder how they got away with it. Like I'm thinking of that. There's an episode where he's helping a shipping company ship smoke detectors, and he was like, "Well, you won't have to pay tax. You won't have to pay a tariff if it's classified as a musical instrument." And so he goes through this whole thing, and the woman he's trying to help keeps telling him, "No, I'm not going to do that. That's illegal." And he does it anyway, and he ships a box of smoke detectors to South America tax free, and then shows it to her. And and he also impersonates a was it Love's Sinclair Shell? It was a Shell. He impersonates Shell, the company.
That's right. Yeah,
and does a whole little thing where he's pretending to be Shell, and then even I just don't understand some of that, how they didn't get sued, but whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I love it. It's risky, one thing about the show, but it's the joke. He turns the joke, kind of back on himself a lot too. Yeah. And so, it's some people, don't like the show because it's cringy, and it is very cringy because it's very authentic and like real life. I mean, I don't know, if you live your life and if you hang out with people like my family, I mean, it's just full of cringy moments all of the time, but you can't look away, and so in that way, it's so raw and so real, and I love it. And there's a threshold though that some people maybe don't have for the show. But I think it helps in that he's making fun of himself at the same time too, and it's not just it's not all Scott's tots. You get the scene after where Michael's a reasonable person again and is really sweet to Aaron. So in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah, Caitlin, literally, my wife, could not. I made her watch the rehearsal with me because it was only 6 episodes, but we watched a few episodes of Nathan For You, and she eventually told me, "You have to watch this on your own. I can't handle it. It's too cringy." And so I watched that whole show by myself. But yeah, it's a good way to sum it up. Hey, I meant to ask you when we started.
Yes,
we have a system on Not Qualified for movies and shows and whatever, which is that your favorite movie of all time is number one. It's your number one movie. Yeah. And then your least favorite movie is a 100. Is your number 100. And so it's a sliding scale. Every movie you've ever seen falls between 1 and 100. So it's really like you're giving it a percentage rating, but it's in reverse.
No, I feel like I've seen more than 100 movies from this fall.
No, I know. That's not you. I have too.
No,
you can have multiple. Wrong. No, I know.
I think we need to remake
multiple movies on the same number. And so you have to tell me your number 1 movie and your number 100 movie. And then, or I guess you could do, since we're talking about TV, you could do TV shows, but then you have to, although you should do movie, because least favorite TV show, it's always going to be just some trash reality show. So, yeah. But then afterward, you have to give each of these shows we just talked about a number between 1 and 100 that represents how you feel.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I'll just do the top one for TV show. I don't know if I have a number 1. I'd say that's a position that's always being kind of vied for. So I'll say number 2. Really love Arrested Development as a sitcom. It's probably the best sitcom ever made. So I agree on Arrested Development. And for a movie, I know it's really childish and really silly, but Fight Club is still like one of the best movies ever made to me. So I'm going to give Fight Club number 2 spot. I just enjoy it so very much. And for Nathan For You, I'm honestly going to put it right there at number 3.
Nice.
As perhaps the second best show ever made. So my scale's even more confusing than number 3. That's the fine. Second best.
Interesting.
And then the rehearsal, I'm going to put at 9. I'm going to give it a 9. I really enjoyed it. Now I'm excited because there's more to come with the rehearsal. So
there is. And I'm curious though, because I thought for sure this is something that's one and done. There's no way to make a sequel to this, but he's doing season 2. So I don't know what that's going to entail. What did you like better? What about the rehearsal made it not as good for you as Nathan For You?
Honestly, just the breadth of the work of Nathan For You. There's so much more to laugh at because there's so many more lines and everything. I mean, if I took episode by episode, it'd be really hard to compare them. I mean, episode 1 of the rehearsal is perhaps the best episode ever made. So that'd be like a number 2 for me for each episode. Yeah. But there were some slower episodes which are funny in their own way. But overall, I think the pacing made it. Because I watched it week by week and as they came out, which was just this summer, and it made it maybe a little bit. If you have a slow episode in the middle of the season, you have to wait a whole 2 weeks or whatever to get to another kind of highlight. So I think that for me took it down a few points. Not that it's not good. If I was binge watching it, it'd probably be a different experience. But
I binge watched it, so yeah.
Yeah. What about you? I'd love to hear your ranking for it.
I was going to give Nathan For You a 6, but I was going to give the rehearsal a 5. They're very close to me. Ooh. But I just the absolute Nathan For You is a lot narrower in terms of what it's doing. It's the same thing. It's the same concept. Whereas the rehearsal I felt like was a lot more. I don't know. I just loved how meta it was. It was way more of an undertaking. I feel like in terms of. Yep. I mean, not in terms of how. Just there's more content of Nathan For You. So
staffing.
In that sense. Yeah. What?
Staffing. It was a big undertaking of staffing and
but also
construction.
Just the whole concept was so. I don't know. It's exactly. I love it. So.
I'd love to leave you a voicemail. If I were to leave you a voicemail, how would I get a hold of you?
So if you or theoretically anyone wanted to leave a voicemail, they would call the number 918-268-6337, and then they would call that number.
I'm sorry, could you give that number one more time?
It would be 918-268-6337.
congratulations.
Theoretically,
for calling in.
would they hear something like this?
That would be something close to what I would hear.
If you're not, even better. Tell us what you want us to talk about. Tell us a movie you want us to talk about. Ask a question, and maybe we'll answer it on the show.
Hi there, Not Qualified. This is Not Qualified. Zach Vercruzen, best friend of the show. And I would love to hear you guys talk about Nathan Fielder's works, Nathan for You, and The Rehearsal. Thank you so much. I love you.
And I love you, Zach. Hey, you know, I'm going to do much similar to what Nathan Fielder does. I think I'm just going to cut this episode together in a way that makes it seem much more than it is.
Turn this really awkward pile into a story.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for the voicemail. I hope they listen to it.
It's been such a pleasure to record with you today. And I just really hope that you get some better hosts on the show. You know, I'm really vying for it. So you included, you know, if you can really replace yourself.
Look, if there's somebody gunning for my job, I'm willing to give them an audition. I'll turn the keys over.
Has been a pleasure.
It has been. Hey, thanks everybody for listening. Leave a review. Go to zephfoster.com/podcast and then buy stuff. Go to Patreon .com/notqualifiedpod and find us there. Or just tell your friends about us because as all great revolutions in history, they usually start from the bottom up. And except in the case of like 70% of revolutions.
Speaking of bottoms, check out this Not Qualified tattoo I got right there.
Hey, nice. That's wonderful. Who did that?
I've got a special bud tattoo guy.
I'm sure you do. Any last words, Zachariah, before the sniper takes you out?
Yeah, I would really like for my last words to be what I really wish I would have said.